Ready to go? Okay, good evening. The April 11th meeting of the Lower Macungie Township Planning Commission is now called to order. Before we get to the formal agenda, I just have a few announcements. First, on a sad note, Planning Commission Rudy Feischl passed away on March 18th after a short illness. Rudy was an all-around nice person, very committed to his community, having served on a number of volunteer boards. He is survived by his wife and 2 children. Rudy served his community well, and he will be missed. So Godspeed, Rudy. Also, you may have noticed that we have 2 new faces with us tonight. So I just wanted to welcome Martine Minninger.
Yes, got it.
Welcome, Martine. And then we also have Ozias Moore. So welcome to both of you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
There is one change to tonight's agenda. Agenda item 2. The Valley at Indian Creek, 3510 Macungie Road, preliminary final plan has been removed from the agenda at the applicant's request. So we do have that one change to the agenda tonight. First item is approval of the February 14th regular meeting minutes. All the Planning Commission members have received copies of the draft minutes. Are there any changes or corrections to the draft minutes? And I know Ozias and Martine, you were not present obviously at that meeting. So you can vote or you could choose to just abstain.
I'll abstain.
So then we'll just note for the record that the 2 of you are abstaining because you were not present at. But is there a motion to approve the minutes as drafted?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further comment? All in favor of approving the February 14th meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we will note for the record the 2 abstentions. Okay, next item on the agenda is the preliminary final plan for the Cove at Millbrook. And Nate, I know you're participating remotely, but if you want to discuss some of the planning issues with us, we certainly would appreciate it.
Sure thing. And actually, one of the things I'm looking to do right now also is get a share screen going for everybody, so that we can proceed forward with showing everybody the most recent version of Cove at Millbrook. So just give me a second here as I pull that up. Okay, can everybody see the plan?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a residual property of what was previously known as the Wiener Tract, which was part of the acquisition of the township several years ago. The applicants have come in now several times, working with township staff on a proposal for a 14-lot subdivision. You can see a horseshoe-shaped lot, road pattern here on this triangular-shaped lot. I think one of the most important things to note, for those watching for the first time here, is traditionally you would see a stormwater basin as part of the design. However, due to its proximity to an unnamed tributary of the creek and where it stands in the watershed, we're actually in a situation where they can proceed forward using design methodology to allow for basically slow flow into the creek. The creek is actually over here. And again, that's an unnamed tributary. And so it will flow from the rear lots, and basically everything will get treatment back here at the rear of the lot. Now, we've been working with the applicant for some time on this. As everybody can see, there's lot frontage on Macungie Road for our new planning commissioners. Our subdivision and land development ordinance generally calls for and requires frontage improvements like curbing and sidewalk and or paths. We have worked very closely with the applicants to establish a trail, as you can see right here, which would take the place of those frontage improvements, partially because of the steep grade along the creek there, but also for this being an amenity for the residents of this neighborhood, and also our continued efforts to connect our greenway trails along the creek throughout the township. Also, I should note that you'll see trail frontage improvements here along Sauerkraut Lane, which will go the entirety of the lot as well. And of course, as with any subdivision, the expectation would be the establishment of a streetlight district so we can get streetlights on this unnamed lot as well. Last but not least, staff has consistently recommended to the applicants for the benefit of the abutting neighbors here that we retain as many of the old growth trees as possible and any tree lines as possible to just ensure continued quality of life for those residents. Again, this project has been, I think it's been almost a year since it's been in front of us, because we've been working very closely with the applicants on a particular set of improvements that may or may not be required as part of the proposal, which is why the applicants are here again before us tonight. And I will allow the township engineer to speak to this in a little bit further detail. However, I should note that there is a culvert that runs over on the western side of the lot here along Sauerkraut Lane for this unnamed tributary of the creek. And we've been working on ensuring that Sauerkraut Lane is in good working condition for trucks, obviously not big trucks, but trucks that would be around for Amazon deliveries and the like, as well as for regular traffic, such as residents coming to and from work, coming home, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been working with the applicants on that. We've also been working, since the trail would end here at what would be private property, working to try and obtain an easement that would be allowed for public access for us to eventually potentially get a bridge across this to do further improvements on Macungie Road. So the township would have the ability to work with applicants moving forward, as well as residents, on whether we're going to make improvements to Macungie Road to get that section of Greenway done, or whether we work with and negotiate with the residents here to try and get that connectivity point in. So by and large, it's a smaller infill subdivision development here. Those have been the two main issues. I would like to defer to the township engineer to speak about it in a little bit further detail. I should note, without scrolling all the way down on the plan here, the benefits and the amenities of this subdivision have been quite generous. There's a very strong and good landscaping plan. Again, that trail connectivity is built in. And again, also for us, one of the most important things, as you'll see on the lots here, aside from lot 16, where it will be a little bit tight, all of these lots do have the ability to create future amenities in their rear yards, which will make our zoning officers' life a little bit easier when they come in to do patios and such. So that's the extent of my comments. I would like to defer to the township engineer, and I'm sure the applicants have a few points that they'd like to bring up. But again, we have had good working dialogue with them now for quite some time, and we are excited to see this project eventually come to fruition.
All right, thank you, Nate. Just to elaborate a little bit on what Nate had mentioned, we did not do a formal review of this project with this application, but our previous letter concerns were the culvert along Sauerkraut Lane. It is a large diameter culvert, and I know there was concerns about the applicant replacing it. And the applicant has been working with our office as well as the planning director, Nate, to kind of coordinate the improvements out front. It's my understanding that the applicant will be replacing that pipe culvert in its entirety, as well as extending it as much as possible to allow, extending it. I could hear myself very clearly, but so it's my understanding that the applicant will be replacing that pipe in full across Sauerkraut Lane, as well as extending it, I want to say 12 feet, which was the maximum allowed by DEP without going to a general permit. That will enable some road widening along Sauerkraut Lane, which alleviates the existing head wall being right up against the edge of road, as well as it provides pedestrian access over that small tributary along Sauerkraut Lane, or a location for sidewalk along Sauerkraut Lane, which will help with future connectivity. So at this point in time, we're satisfied with the improvements as shown.
Attorney Durso, I know you've been before us before, but you could just introduce yourself and your team.
Sure. Kate Durso from Fitzpatrick, Lenson Buba.
I'm Phil Malich with Tuscas Homes, the developer for the project.
I think last time you were here, the big topic of discussion was the culvert.
Yeah,
And it
well,
sounds-
I think it was a couple of things and that's why we weren't expecting a new review letter from Brian and whatnot. We just wanted to kind of come back and say where we think we are as it relates to the improvements along Sauerkraut and then the alternative with the trail as opposed to doing improvements along McCungy Road. When we were here before, we were talking about the best way, and I think maybe Wes had brought it up. How do we get people down to McCungy Road? How do we do the trail with the understanding that, you know, some of the asks were going to be cost prohibitive for a project this size? So let's first talk just about the trail. So what we were proposing is the trail as shown on the plan and then create some kind of an easement for the township at a location that, you know, makes sense. So that if the township in the future wanted to do an easement to connect to McCungy Road, because that would require a crossing and a lot of permits and other things that we're not really able to do with a site of this size. So I guess the first question is does the trail, is everybody sort of on the same page with the trail that we're proposing? Again, it would terminate at the property line and then we would have an easement as necessary to get in the future potentially to McCungy Road, even though we have those steep slopes there. So I think that's the first thing. And then we can kind of talk about Sauerkraut if that makes sense.
All right, let me make sure I understand what's going on with the trail. So the trail would be constructed essentially along the frontage of Sauerkraut,
Well, first I'm just talking about the trail that goes in the back.
right?
Nothing on Sauerkraut yet. I'm.
Okay, but the
Sorry.
trail is planned for along Sauerkraut, and that would be constructed by the developer.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And
Yeah,
then
that wasn't what I was talking about, but yes, yes.
And then the path that would go through the open space and the kind of along the floodplain.
Yeah.
That would be an easement, but not actually constructed. The township would be responsible for constructing. Is that how I understand it?
So we would like that to be the case, but no.
Okay.
No.
So you're going to
So-
actually construct it.
Yeah, the township has asked us to construct the trail as you see it across the property through the area that sort of meanders. But the easement would be an easement that gets you to, yes, whoever's doing that. I
Right,
think it's me.
that's
Sorry.
me, and I would note that this trail would be constructed in lieu of frontage improvements
Yes.
along McCungy Road because of the steep slopes there. So this would be an on-site trail that would be the responsibility of the developer to construct, the HOA to maintain, and then it's up to the HOA, but obviously we always recommend if there's not going to be any winter maintenance, that there's signs posted for that. And then last but not least, just because there's some outfall here, working with the township engineer to ensure that when water flows over this, it's not a health, safety, or welfare issue.
I guess my confusion was that the plan just identifies the trail as a 10-foot path easement.
Yes.
Doesn't actually show that anything's being
Yeah,
built.
that's just because we didn't resubmit revised plans yet. So
Okay.
the intention is what you see as an easement would be a constructed, what I'm calling a trail. And that the easement part would be as Nate was sort of alluding to or showing on the plan, in somewhere in the vicinity of the north of the site going to McCungy Road.
And there is a connectivity point here with the internal sidewalk network that you
Yes.
can see that would be in between these two units to allow the residents easy access to the trail.
So that's when I was talking about the trail, I was just talking about that part of it before we got to Sauerkraut Road. So
Why don't we go on to Sauerkraut?
Sauerkraut, okay. So I'll let you, Phil, talk about what we're doing on Sauerkraut.
Actually, can I come
sorry.
back to it?
Yeah, yeah.
I think I fully understand it, but there was one thing that came up. So the surface of that trail, is that determined yet?
I think the surface of the trail was supposed to be like a gravel type
Okay.
surface.
And so I think I heard Nate say about winter maintenance, but I missed if he was saying it would be maintained or it would not be maintained.
The HOA would be responsible for maintaining it.
Right.
I think we are trying to figure out what the best material would be
Okay.
for that, because of the different, I think is I don't want to put words in Nate's mouth, but I think that's what he was alluding to, is that depending on what type of material it is and being able to keep it open.
Okay,
Yes.
so it will be maintained by the HOA though.
It will be maintained by the
Right, okay.
HOA, yes.
Just making sure. Okay, I think you were going to go into sauerkraut, which is probably the next question, but instead of asking a question, just tell us what you were going to tell us.
Okay.
Right, so on sauerkraut, we are proposing a widening sauerkraut along the frontage of a couple feet. And then an 8-foot trail along sauerkraut.
Have you discussed the widening with the township engineer? I guess, are the two of you on the same page in terms of what the widening will ultimately look like?
Yeah, we believe that the widening is as shown on the plans, right, Brian? Is that what you guys? I mean, we talked about it a while ago, but
It's my understanding the widening will be, you guys were not originally proposing the full widening, I think it was 19-foot half width.
correct.
But you were proposing some widening, as well as the 8-foot trail, and we assumed that that was gonna be along the full frontage of Sauerkraut Lake. I think
Okay.
you're showing stopping at the, right before the culvert. I
Right.
believe it was
Before-
discussed that now, yeah, with the discussions, you guys are gonna run that all the way to the corner, is that my understanding?
Well, I think the trail, I think the intent for the trail, and I guess there's no problem with taking it to the intersection. I think the intent with the trail was to have it get off the road at the location that Kate described. So it would run along the creek as opposed to extending to Lower Macungie Road or to Macungie Road. With the widening of the culvert, then the widening can certainly continue past that point up to the intersection. That's something that we could work out with you guys.
Mhm.
Yeah, we would want that, Phil, just because of future trail networks that would actually come up Macungie Road from other developments that we're actually working with right now. So as you know, we're trying to connect the dots, and part of that means planning for other trails kind of coming up to eventually meet that. So if we can get it to the end of the lot line there, it's actually pretty important, especially with some of the development going on down the road on Macungie Road.
All right, so the trail along Sauerkraut would be the entire frontage of the property, all the way to Macungie Road.
Yes.
Yes.
And I know last time there was an issue with trying to fit the trail where the culvert is, and that there might not be enough room, but because you're replacing the culvert, you can now create enough room to put the trail in.
Yeah, the original idea after we appeared before you guys and in subsequent discussions with staff was to bring the trail to the other side of the road where there is a little bit of room. There is enough room to get a walking path over that existing culvert, but now since we're replacing it, we're just gonna keep it on the same side of the road.
Yeah, when we were here before, we were trying to avoid all the costs associated with replacing the culvert that's not in good condition now, but not caused by this development. Yeah.
And what about any other frontage improvements? I think I've heard that the frontage improvements along Macungie you're asking for a waiver of those, and that in lieu of making the Macungie Road frontage improvements, you're putting
The tr-
that section of trail in.
Correct.
Right.
The section of trail and then the easement to the township to connect.
And then the frontage improvements along Sauerkraut, you talked about widening, and we talked about the 8-foot wide path.
Mhm.
Were there any other improvements that are planned along Sauerkraut?
No, that's it. And that path would then transition to a traditional sidewalk inside the development along the road.
So a macadam path along Sauerkraut, and then internal to the development, it would be concrete.
Right.
And just the material of the trail that goes back, I don't know that we've finalized that for sure of what the material, I don't think we had, I'm looking at Brian yeah. I think we talked about a gravel type thing, but we can
That's how I
figure
remember
that
it
out.
too.
Yes.
And some of
yes.
it had to do with the sewer line, that the trail is close to the sewer line.
Yes, and not having to compact it, yes. But we think that at least gets the connectivity that was asked of us And that I think it also addressed trying to keep the feel of of what's there with the, with the light district that we're proposing and the significant amount of trees that we're proposing. I did note that Nate he did an updated review letter saying maybe we should flip flops where some of the trees are, and we'll certainly look at that, the landscaping. I don't think he wasn't saying that we didn't have enough. It was just maybe realign or replace them and put them in different sections.
I'll open it up for comments or questions from the planning commission.
I'll just add, thank you for addressing those and not making them an issue that has to be debated about. I mean, the comments that you heard in that first meeting that you were here, to me, are completely satisfied and probably over and above what would normally be done. So all of this connectivity, I think, is so beneficial to the residents of township, and not making them an issue, just recognizing that this is a benefit that everyone gets when a new neighborhood comes in, is worth it. So thanks for doing that.
We'll open up for comments or questions from the public. Any comments or questions from the public at this time? Attorney Durso, did you have a chance to take a look at the draft motion?
I'm not aware of a draft
Okay.
motion. So no.
I think maybe one thing that should be clarified in the draft motion is that the path along Sauerkraut will be the full length along Sauerkraut.
2 seconds.
Yeah, we'll give you a minute or two to take a look at it. I don't know if we want to add.
What number?
Well,
Let's make it number 7.
yeah, number 2, it's kind of the path as shown on the plan. But this is going beyond the path that's shown on the
Shall extend the entire length.
of the frontage along Sauer.
Just while you're looking at it, I think the one for number 6, I think it should say that all landscaping shall be maintained by the homeowners association or the respective property owners in perpetuity, because there will be some landscaping could be on a property.
Okay, so for number 6, we're just going to add the end of the last sentence for appropriate property owners.
Yes. And what was the one you were,
Yeah, number 2
Okay.
just deals with the trail, as I read it, along the open space. And it says that the trail will be constructed as shown on the plan, but the plan doesn't show the trail being extended along Sauerkraut to Macungie. So we'll have to add another condition that the trail along Sauerkraut will be extended along the entire frontage.
yes, that's fine.
So as I read it, number 2 deals with the trail in the open space, and then number 7 will deal with the trail along Sauerkraut.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
Number 2 addresses the easement. Yep.
it's it. I'm sure they'll read it. Partial waiver. Oh, I actually think, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think you don't necessarily need number 7 because it's also addressed in the waiver and number 3. But it's entirely up to you if you want to put it in both places. Either,
Either way.
I think we could live with, as long as the township engineer knows that he's going to direct the trail along the entire front.
Yeah, yeah,
We are aware that.
Yeah.
it's gonna extend to
I
the-
was just saving you having to
Yeah.
re-
Yeah, As
rewrite.
long as
it.
everyone's in agreement, the engineer is going to require trail along the entire
Yeah,
frontage.
we completely understand.
All right, then we'll get rid of 7.
Make a note.
All right, any further comments or questions?
Just making sure we have all the waivers.
I guess, I mean, I think that obviously I understand.
I was just gonna make sure
We
that
look at
is-
this in the future, but
And can we assume that the widening, like, that we don't need anything separate regarding curbing?
Yeah, I don't know that have we ever asked for curbing in any of the review letters along Sauerkraut?
Been so long since I've reviewed this plan. I thought curbing was originally proposed. No?
The only place that it's not proposed is along Sauerkraut.
The long
Yeah.
sour.
And I think, I mean, I was just talking to Kate here.
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the widening improvements is that. So, you know, the condition here is as directed by the township engineer. I mean, we're fine with,
I mean, would likely assume that we would require curbing.
Yeah.
Typically, we only let that be waived if there's a drainage issue that's being created by installing it in the first place. So I would expect that we would require curbing and storm sewer inlets and things like that.
So let me get this straight. You're suggesting that we require curbing along Sauerkraut?
Don't have the letter in front of me. I
That's
bet you it's in.
I think what you're saying is let's not waive it yet and he can check on it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Is that, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Leave it as is.
Yeah, I'm just, well, we can confirm it offline with your office, Brian. I believed we originally requested a waiver from sidewalks, curbs, but we'll figure it out.
Okay.
I don't want to put him on the spot because just making sure there wasn't any other waivers. Just making sure. I don't know that the letter, so for number 1, it says a partial waiver of Saldo 22A 705A. I think it's 705 2A and 1F.
We'll confirm that, Kate.
Okay,
I think we took it from the waiver requests on the plans, but we can certainly confirm it for you.
okay. Yeah, I'm just looking, I just pulled Brian's last letter, so I'm kind of going off of that. I'm not reading from the Saldo, so I apologize.
actually, Nate, I'm assuming you're at a computer here. I actually have our waiver request letter that we submitted with the original plans, and we can just bang through it quick. There are a couple other things on here that some of them are procedural.
Yeah, just give me a second. I need to stop sharing and I can try and pull that up for you all.
I'll just start going through them while Nate's pulling it up. So the first waiver requested was section 22A-401. And this was to allow the application to proceed as a joint preliminary final plan. Waiver number 2 was section 22A-7041D, which has to do with the lot to width ratio for lot 16 due to its irregular shape and existing boundaries. It is 0.8 and it should be no less than 1:1. Waiver 3, section 22A-7052A, that has to do with the cartway widening that we've talked a lot about. We are proposing a 4-foot widening along Sauerkraut Lane, except at the culvert. This was at the time at Macungie Road. Obviously, that has now changed. The waiver of the widening of Macungie Road is requested. Section 22A-705 3B1.
Yep, that's. the one.
Okay.
Yep.
This was probably one of the most important ones. This was the horizontal curves on our road because it's such a compact development. 22A-705-9.
Yep.
Sidewalks, curbs, and bikeways, and we did ask for a waiver from sidewalks and curbs along Sauerkraut and Macungie Road. And in lieu of that, we were proposing the asphalt path as recommended. And obviously, we talked about the pathway along the creek. And the last waiver that we asked for was 22A-710 2B2 street trees. And that only applied to planting street trees along Macungie Road for the same reasons that we talked about the widening.
Probably what the best thing to do is allow us to revise the draft motion and maybe come back for the next meeting. Then we can address all of the waivers that are identified in your letter. I'm not sure how much time, if we have a time issue and if we need a time extension, but if we need a time extension, are you agreeable to granting the time extension?
Yes, I don't know that we need one, but yes, but can we be in agreement though? Because obviously the submittal deadline for next month's would be Monday.
Monday.
Yeah. So can we agree that we don't need to resubmit the plan, but that we'll have a updated motion for that meeting?
Yeah, I see no need to resubmit a plan unless you disagree. Nate, is there a reason to have a new plan submitted?
It's fine. It's absolutely fine. No worries.
Okay, so
And-
let's do that. Then we
Okay.
have time to work and clean up the draft motion,
Okay,
and we'll see you back next month.
okay. And you can, Brian, if you want to talk to Phil or I about the
Yeah.
curbing or the improvements, so we're on the same
Refresh our
page.
Memory of this.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's fine. And then Nate, if you do need an extension, just give me a holler.
I
Or
will,
Mark-
and
Or Mark, either of you.
I will certainly do that. And my apologies on the waivers. I believe I took it from the plan and not the letter, Phil. So my apologies when I was putting the motion together there.
It sounds like that's our fault. So.
No, yeah. No worries. Okay,
All right, so at this point, we'll entertain a motion to table action on the Cove at Millbrook subdivision plan. Is there a motion to table?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor of tabling action on the plan, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. We'll see you next month.
see you
Thank
next
you.
month. Thanks.
All right, next up is 2072 Elbow Lane minor subdivision. And Nate, if you want to review the planning issues with us.
Sure thing. Just give me a moment here. I'm going to pull up the plan for everybody. Okay, so this is a 3-lot minor subdivision that is based off of a lot that immediately abuts the Mountain View Estates subdivision that the board approved some time ago now. Gregory Drive, which you see there, just to the northwest of the site, is.
Nate,
the-
we can't see the plan.
Okay, hang on. How about now?
No, we see a bunch of icons. So maybe you can double click on the plan. It might bring it up.
Yep, here, just give me a second. I don't know why it did that. My apologies.
Now we got it, Nate.
How about
You
now?
can see the
Sorry
plan now.
about that. I appreciate that. My apologies. So, just so everyone can see. Again, this is a residual lot right here, that, basically sits right next to, it's an existing single-family residence, I should point out, with accessory structures. Gregory Drive, which is the new road, that is part of Mountain View Estates, comes out here. And the new single-family home that's been constructed as part of Mountain View Estates is right here. This is Elbow Lane. The applicant is proposing to take the existing home, retrofit it, and I would presume sell it, and then create two new lots. And that is actually what you're seeing here as part of the subdivision plan. You'll see 1 lot, 2 lot, 3 lot. I think something very important to bring up here is that each of these lots would be independent of the Mountain View Estates subdivision. So some of the questions that we brought up in our review letter are basically mail delivery, any streetlights that are installed, stormwater management, which actually, if you look at the plan right here, shows 2 infiltration beds at the rear of the site. I believe the township engineer can speak on that item a little bit more, given the situation involving those. But by and large, these are essentially 2 new homes and 1 existing home that would be immediately connected to a subdivision that was recently approved by the township, but isn't part of it. So obviously we have our disclosure ordinance. Obviously, it would be noted to the applicants as well as the potential buyers of the home as they purchase, but it should be clear that whereas Gregory Drive and all those residents are going to collect their mail at a joint mailboxes, these 2 homes would need to figure out how they're going to get their mail. Additionally, we would note that there is proposed and we would recommend highly that full frontage improvements along Elbow Lane and along Gregory Drive both be included as part of this project. Full frontage improvements as well as the street trees, which are proposed for the site as well, along the frontage of the road, just to basically complete everything out. This is an infill subdivision. This is the new normal for us. We will see this fairly often with other lots, I'm sure. The interesting thing here is how it connects into an existing subdivision. So from a planning perspective, so long as the frontage improvements are made, and everything plugs in nicely to the existing subdivision, and we handle some of the requisite issues like mailing and the like, I don't have any other comments. We would note that obviously our ordinance with requirements towards architectural grade cladding would apply to these homes, but that's been the case with this subdivision for some time. And on everything else, I would defer to the township engineer to bring the planning commission up to speed.
All right, thank you, Nate. So yeah, just to elaborate, Gregory Drive was constructed with the Mountain View Estates project. That roadway is currently homes being constructed on that roadway. We just wanted to bring up concerns about access for the site. There may need to be a temporary access with the developer of the Mountain View Estates, which you obviously are, but you may need to execute an access agreement for those 2 lots until the such time that the road is dedicated. So that's more of just a legal issue. To kind of also reiterate what Nate had said. One of our concerns is that just getting the frontage improvements along Elbow Lane to really just finish out that section of the project. I think that just makes a lot of sense. Should be fairly straightforward. And then third, the on-lot stormwater systems. This 3-lot subdivision is actually right at the cusp of needing to provide or not allowing on-lot systems, but we are in agreement. This is really the only way you can provide stormwaters for these lots. So we certainly appreciate that you are putting in these underground infiltration beds. The only item that we're actually concerned about is just where these would be discharging, just providing a location on the plan showing where they are discharging so that we can confirm we're not directing stormwater towards the adjacent properties, concentrated flows towards the adjacent property. But just, and that's honestly a minor thing. Thank you.
Applicant is with us tonight. Dave, I know you from way back when
Way
you
back.
were, your firm was engineer with Upper Saucon Township, but if you could just introduce yourself and I'm assuming that Mr. Stepniak is with you tonight, but you just introduce yourself and Mr. Stepniak.
Good evening, members. My name is Dave Tedmer. I'm a civil engineer with Keystone Consulting Engineers. We prepared the plans tonight, and with me is Paul Stepniak, the developer, and also, yeah, he's the developer of the adjoining subdivision also. So to quickly address some of the issues that have been brought up so far. There should be no problem with getting an access agreement from the Stepniak for this, something that will satisfy the township. We'll just have to write something up and come up with an answer. There are a couple of items we did want to bring up and just talk to the planning commission about on this one and get your thoughts on it. One of the comments in the letters from Nate had to do with the landscaping. And at the end of the letter, it says trees should be planted on the opposite side of the sidewalk to minimize heaving and infrastructure impacts. Are you saying that you'd like it on the property side of the sidewalk?
We are saying that. So we have found with a lot of our existing subdivisions that trees being planted in the tree strip 10, 20 years out are causing some significant infrastructure issues regarding heaving with sidewalk, curbing, in basically interfering with water and sewer and storm sewer in some cases. So yes, we are recommending on the property side of the sidewalk, or choose a different tree species that doesn't have an invasive root system, maybe with a tap root and root system that will not cause issues to existing infrastructure. The choice is yours, but again, the proposed trees are quite nice. They would be beneficial for the site, so it might be better to put them on the property side of the sidewalk.
Okay, to address that specific item, I think what we'll probably do is if you could, the township would give us a preferred tree type for the area. We'd like to keep the design of this consistent with what's going on in Gregory Drive and other aspects of Elbow Lane. So we'll just change the tree species.
That sounds fine. We'll speak with Kim at CKS and put together a short list for you then that for some species that might be more appropriate for that area there that won't have impacts on sidewalks, curbing and the like.
Okay. The next item that we just wanted to discuss, we're showing a 31-foot wide ultimate right-of-way on the plan. And we're doing that to try and bring or allow the existing unit that's out there now to not be made non-conforming. So our question to you is, would you be willing to accept a 31-foot wide right-of-way on halfway on this side for Elbow Lane in that area in order to allow the existing unit to be non-conforming. If not, I mean, we can make the subdivision work with a 40-foot easement or right-of-way. I don't know that you need it on Elbow Lane. I don't know that that's ever going to be that wide. So we thought we'd bring it up and just discuss it to get everybody's opinion as to whether it's reasonable.
If I could step in, we have pushed other developers to provide the full offer, the full right of way that's required per the ordinance. Quite honestly, I don't see that would push the building setback in past the existing building. However, we don't see that necessarily being an issue. The building's not moving either way, so it would just become an existing nonconformity. Would just make, but we do want to always have that offer of right of way for future improvements as needed.
It looks like the home that's, I guess it would be north or west of Gregory Drive. That's in the Mountain View Estate subdivision. It looks like there's 40 feet from the center line to the front property line for that home.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, we would have it one way on the north side of Gregory Drive and then a different way on the south side of that. Seemed to not to make sense.
And that's only because it's an existing unit. And if the township would rather treat this as an existing nonconformity, opposed to having the additional right of way, then, like I said, we can make this work 3 lots with the 40-foot right of way. We just thought maybe we'd bring it up and
Is that more just for the kind of technical formality side of it? Or is there a plan to build something out that you're concerned that it would suddenly be in an easement if it's 40 feet versus the 31 that's requested?
no, it's the building setback would still exist.
Right.
At the,
I guess I'm just trying to understand what you're asking for it. So there has to be a benefit. What is the benefit that you're looking to get out of that?
the only benefit is that you have let's, for instance, if they want to resell the house.
Right.
Okay. It's a very minor thing, but you're selling a non-conforming house.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think what he's saying is that the way he's drawn it, the existing home on lot 1.
Right.
Would the setback from Elbow Lane would conform with the zoning requirements.
Right.
But if he gives the right of way that's required by the ordinance,
Mhm.
which is more than what's shown on the plan, that house then becomes non-conforming
Okay.
in terms of its setback from the new right of way line. That's the issue.
Okay. Okay.
so
I understand that better.
I
now.
guess the way I'm presenting this is that it's if there was a significant reason to think that Elbow Lane was going to be widened significantly in the future beyond the a 60 plus foot right of way, okay, but to create a non-conforming lot for that tract, and there's the non-conformity is along Elbow Lane. That's the problem. We can't
get
just
where you're-
shift everything around.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, but I think we're just worried that no one knows what the future holds in terms of trails or widening or anything
Okay.
like that. And it's always best for the township to pick up the right of way when it has a chance. And it's just good long-term planning on the township's part.
That's fine then. We can adhere to that. We also just wanted to bring up the road improvements. Now, the one thing on this plan, when the previous subdivision was approved, the developer didn't have this property. So if you look at the easterly curb return at Elbow Lane and Gregory, that kind of juts out about 6 feet into Elbow Lane beyond what it does on the other side of the road. So what we're going to be doing is removing that section of curb and making that parallel with the north or the west side at Gregory Lane. And what we'd like to do is ask for a deferral to the remaining widening of Elbow Lane. What we would propose is putting in the curb return and doing widening across the existing driveway and then transitioning out into Elbow Lane and then ask for deferral to the remaining widening. Mainly because I don't know when Elbow Lane is going to be widened. So,
Are there, when you look at, I guess it's south or east of Gregory Drive along Elbow Lane, that section that's below Gregory Drive,
yes,
is there any curbing on Elbow Lane in that section?
I don't believe so, no.
Well, if I may jump in real quick here, that there are improvements as part of the Mountain View Estate subdivision at the existing home to the north of Gregory Drive. So
It looks like there's a
internally, one thing
small
we were
section of-
thinking about is similar to the, yeah.
It looks like there's a
and-
small section of curb.
Yeah, and we would just recommend, improvements in line with the improvements on the opposite side of the street to match up as much as possible.
But not curb along the entire Elbow Lane frontage of Lot 1.
Brian, do you want to chime in there? I mean, I would say every bit of improvement that we could get would be beneficial, but we do want to make sure that it matches as much as possible on the opposite side of the street.
I mean, yeah, in our letter, we request that they provide widening along the frontage of that property as well.
So curb and widening along the entire frontage of Lot 1, the Elbow Lane portion.
To be consistent with the Mountain View Estates improvements, yes. Is that path along the front, along Elbow Lane, along Lot 1, that's proposed with this property, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you are installing a path there. So it's not as if you're ripping out an existing path to put in the widening. You'd likely have to rip out the curb radius and the handicap ramp at the curb.
Correct.
And then install the new walkways as shown, which you're already proposing to do, along with some new curb and pavement.
I have a question about, so the use, I believe Gregory Drive also comes out on Riverbend, correct? Is it the same street when it comes down? If you go, I mean, it's well, it's kind of existing right now.
Yeah.
The proposed path of where it'll be. But there's, if I remember correctly, onto Riverbend, are there some unusual movements there that this side would actually be used more regularly by someone entering that neighborhood? Is it prohibited to make a left-hand turn?
Yes.
Meaning if someone wants to go in that direction, they'd have to use this more frequently? Right, yeah, not on this side of Gregory Drive,
Yes.
but I believe it's just a loop that goes all the way through, so it's probably the same name. So if anyone wants to head north, they do have to use this exit, is that correct? What I'm getting at is it has the potential that this would be the more regularly used entrance and exit to this neighborhood versus the small portion that comes out onto Riverbend because of some prohibited movements.
I think the flow of traffic would be mostly to the west rather than the east, which already has. You're be going up towards West Coastville. Or which way would you think you're going to be going?
Well, if I exited let's say I wanted to go towards, if I wanted to go east, I can
Okay.
exit onto Riverbend East, correct? From not this side of Elbow Lane, but the southern side, the southern side of Gregory. I guess because there's limited movements at the other side of that,
Yeah,
and it's right on an unusual bend in that road, that this seems like it would have more traffic for someone that felt more comfortable because it would be a much easier road to turn onto. And so I think that this improvement wouldn't be necessarily just for future widening, but also because it would make this intersection a better intersection.
okay.
I mean, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, it's not a built road. I've driven past it and it looked to me like there were limited movements, but correct me if I'm trying to be corrected if I'm wrong in my thinking.
I think when it's all constructed, I don't think they'll, at least at this intersection of Elbow Lane and Gregory Drive, there shouldn't be any significant problems. Okay. How much will this Gregory Drive be some kind of a cutoff? I don't know.
It's
But-
not that it's a cutoff. I think I'm just trying to say that if there's limited movements at another area and it's directly on a bend, it already appears like it would be a challenging intersection at times. So this would be for if I lived in that neighborhood there, it would be my preferred location because it's an easier and safer way to exit the neighborhood.
Well,
Not necessarily directly your problem, but
Yeah,
if we're trying to make an improvement, this would be the time to do that. And it's not just for widening of the entire road. It's really to the benefit of,
I think what we're hearing is that the planning commission would like to see the improvements along the frontage along Elbow Lane, and I think that can be provided.
Okay.
So I think that was, I think those were our only significant concerns. We have a lot of housekeeping items, a lot of outside agency approvals, those types of things to move forward on. And what we will do is we will revise the plans and get new plans into the township and follow up with all the other remaining items we need to do. And we'll be back before you again.
Could you clarify what the relationship is between Lehigh Valley Custom Homes and the owner of the land involved in this particular subdivision, Mr. Stepniak? There clearly is some relationship there because you have access for two of the lots coming out to Gregory Drive. Maybe clarify what that is.
I am the owner of both properties.
All right, so you're the owner or the president of Lehigh Valley.
President of Lehigh Valley Custom Homes, and also the owner of those three.
So there's not gonna be any obstacles to you getting
There shouldn't
access
be.
to Gregory Drive, I guess is where I'm going with this.
Shouldn't be.
There are no obstacles to that, 'cause
No.
that's key to your subdivision.
Right.
All right. I mean, I don't know if we feel comfortable moving ahead tonight. Sounds like we've got some conditions that we could probably deal with. All right, we'll open it up to any comments or questions from the public at this time. Comments or questions from the public? One other thing that comes to mind is the engineer mentioned some concern about the stormwater system. And
Yeah, there shouldn't be any problems with satisfying all of his concerns. His,
All right.
his big concern is he just wants to make sure that we're not directing any stormwater onto an adjoining property. And we can address that adequately.
all right, I think what I heard tonight is we want the full right-of-way dedication along Elbow Lane, 40 feet from center. And then also all of the road improvements, including the curbing along Lot 1, the Elbow Lane side. You're going to address the stormwater issues. And
And the township's gonna get us a preferred
street tree. You work
Right.
with the township on getting the street tree issue resolved.
And that way we can have everything consistent with the previous subdivision.
All right, it sounds from the last applicant that was before us, it sounds like your deadline for getting on the next planning commission meeting is Monday.
Yeah, I don't think we'll probably skip a month.
All right, so just so you understand
Yeah.
that if you want
No,
to be
it's-
before us next month, you got to
Yeah,
get
it's-
something in by Monday.
Yeah, we have a number of, other items to, the planning module, lots of stuff to do. So we're gonna have an extra month in here. We just wanted to bring this before you tonight to, show it to you and, just get some initial thoughts on what you're doing, what we're doing.
Go ahead, Wes.
I guess, so this project is separate from the other one, yet you're the same owner of both projects, correct?
Correct.
Is it part of this, it's not part of the same NPDS permit for the stormwater? And is it that it's over an acre? Is that why these two specific drainage systems need to be?
No, it's just that, actually it's under an acre.
Right,
So, we don't need an.
so you're just going
NPDES.
over and above to make sure that this is a non-issue.
Well, yeah, essentially, we're satisfying the 167 requirements.
Okay. And why not add this to that project?
Then we'd have to open up the other project.
Okay, okay,
And, it's easier to just keep this separate right now.
okay.
And not reopen all the drainage from the other one.
I think I heard you say earlier that the Mountain View Estates development was under construction.
Yes,
And after it was under construction, that's when you acquired this property here.
correct.
So you couldn't really coordinate the two because you had already started Mountain View. And then after starting that project, you acquired this.
That's correct.
I just make sure I got that right. I'm not.
No, you're correct. And that's why the radius at Elbow Lane is the way it is. But that will be corrected now with this subdivision.
All right, we'll open it up for public comment. Mari, you're good? Okay. Is there a motion to table? We have a
I'll
motion from
make that
Wes.
motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Your second? We have a motion and a second to table. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries by a vote of 5-0.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you
Another-
a couple of weeks. All right, thanks. Next item on the agenda is 6709 Mountain Road. This is the Stone Hill Haven Minor Subdivision. And Nate, you can review the plan with us.
Be happy to. I'm pulling that up right now as we speak. Just give me a second here. To give everybody a little bit of background, you have seen a sketch for this site before where there were a number of additional units proposed. At this point in time, we're looking at essentially a 2-lot subdivision. You can see it here. Can everybody see this?
We can see it, Nate.
Okay, so this is the existing lot as is. The existing lot as is at the corner of Mountain Road and Gaiman Road. A couple of important points about this lot that should be noted. You see down here, there's an existing residence on the site that's right up against Mountain Road. I should also note that this is a historic residence. I think it has a construction point of the very early 1800s, if my memory calls correct. Additionally, there is also resource area at the rear of this site. And when I say resource area, I mean those ethereal springs and creeks that are coming off of South Mountain, where the aquifer is basically coming out. We also have some right here along the side of Gaiman Road. So there's a fair amount of resource area in here, which for purposes of third-party reviews would be reviewed and looked at with some scrutiny by the third-party agencies. That being said, the applicant's proposing a single lot subdivision. And so what you'll see here is this is the proposed lot line that'll house the existing residence, which is the historic residence and some of the resource area. And the remainder of the site becomes the new buildable lot. This would be a buildable lot. You can see here for the septic fields for one residence, presumably in this general area here with frontage on Mountain Road. And again, the remaining area that is where we have the runoff coming from the mountain and the springs outletting downstream over here on the western end of the site. This is about as clear cut as you can get. Some minor subdivision. We see these often. And they're fairly easy. As I'm sure as everybody knows, we have one that's a couple more lots on Mountain Road, a little bit down the street. That also hasn't been much of a challenge. Given the fact that Mountain Road and Gaiman Road are rural streets, we would recommend waivers of all the curbing and frontage improvements, specifically because we want to maintain the rural character of the road and the rural character of that neighborhood. However, the one major planning comment that we do have, and this is right in line with the recommendation that we were just talking about with the Cove, is to the north of this site is Stonehill Meadows, where we have an existing trail network set up. And we think that it's pretty important that if a easement can be put in place on this property, either here splitting it or over here at the end with some frontage improvements. There's land that's owned by the Wildlands Conservancy that is up on the mountain there that has a lot of walking trails. And one thing that we have been thinking all along, and you may remember from our discussion points when we were looking at more units up there, is how to get the residents of Stonehill Meadows and Woodmont and Hills at Lockridge and basically everywhere else briefly to the north, how to get them up to this great resource area we have up here on the mountain, which is these natural walking trails. So getting some trail connectivity up there would be really beneficial from a lot of residents who live further down the mountain. So I would just invite the applicant to figure out where we think could be the best spot to put in an easement. Obviously, since we're not building anything right now and we're not making improvements and we're just creating a buildable lot, we would only be asking for an easement. But figuring out where that could be would be important. Also, just because of how closely we've been working with the post office and whatnot, we would want to make sure as part of this minor subdivision that we figure out the address for the new residents here so that when they come in, they can get mail service as needed. So I don't have any other comments other than that and would defer to Brian on anything else he might have.
Yeah, agreed. Honestly, it's a 2-lot subdivision. There's no proposed improvements. It's really just an exercise in changing the lot lines or adding the additional lot line. The applicant is proposing on-lot water and sewer. They provide the sewer locations for a septic field. They just need to finalize paperwork for the planning module and things like that. But that's all very typical stuff. So it's really no major engineering concerns with this project.
Okay, applicant's representative is with us tonight. If you just want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Justin Mosseri, civil engineer from Wilkinson Apex Engineering Group. I don't have any additional comments. I do agree with Nate's waiver request for frontage improvements. The other comments in the letter all will comply to my knowledge, except for comment number 2. We'd like to request a waiver of that.
You're talking about comment 2 in Nate's letter.
Yes.
Or-
No, I'm sorry.
the engineer's letter.
Comment 2 in the CKS letter. That cites 2 ordinance sections of which we'd like to request a waiver.
And we're recommending that they request that waiver.
Okay. Are any comments or questions from the planning commission? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, oh, one at a time. If you could just come up here and use the microphone at the podium. Just state your name.
Ken Martin. And I live in Stonehill Meadows. And I know this property has, obviously, as you're aware, has been proposed for at least one subdivision prior to this. I mean, I was at a meeting, zoning meeting that the developer representative never really showed up for it. So I don't know what the outcome of that was, but my concern is what's going to happen. They're proposing 2 lots. And so, you know, my question is, are they going to further subdivide the other lot in the future and put more homes on it? Because that was their original intent. And so, you know, I don't know what the township feels about that. I mean, you know, can you approve this, or can they get approval to divide this into 2 lots? And then at some point down the line, decide that they want to put 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever lots on the separate lot 2, I guess is what I'm referring to. Because I'm concerned
Sir, I
about,
can speak to that really quick. Oh,
Yep, go ahead, Nate. Why don't you, sounds like you can answer that question. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I would like to allay your concerns, sir. So just a couple of points here. As you can see, there is on-lot septic that is proposed for the site. A certain amount of acreage is necessary to be able to have an on-lot septic system as well. Unless public water and sewer are going to be delivered to this site, first and foremost, the land wouldn't be large enough to be able to manage that. Second, there would zoning relief would be necessary for the size of the lot, because this is in our rural residential district, and the lot sizes up here are, unless they're pre-existing non-conforming, as some of them are required to be larger. And so the complying ordinance, doing anything smaller would require zoning relief, or utilizing that open space subdivision development, which quite frankly, once this lot gets subdivided off and sold to somebody who's going to build a home, my understanding is the applicant wouldn't be in control of it anymore. And then last but not least, I think the most important thing to think about is over here on the western end of the site. And this was something we brought up previously with the applicants. This is just really a tricky area from a resource perspective. And not only natural resources, where there would likely be a PINDY search, which is basically for any endangered species in this, basically in this swampy area here, but also just the water coming off the mountain. These are, again, springs, and they do carry a lot of water. And then in addition to that, they carry runoff water when we get storms. So that whole area is kind of out of bounds. So, you know, with those couple of notions taken into place, this is a fairly simple 2-lot subdivision that would create one new buildable lot. Anything above and beyond that, we would be talking about some large scale infrastructure improvements, or a large amount of zoning relief that would be necessary, or very simply, just because of what our ordinances are and the state law is, the ability to get a septic field on that size of a lot, because the state regulates how big a lot can be for a septic field, and this meets it. Anything smaller, and we're starting to get a little bit challenged. So rest assured, this is just basically one new lot subdivision the way we see it.
And maybe we just get clarification from the applicant as to what are your intentions with the new lot that's being created here.
I don't believe the developer intends to further subdivide it. The by right lot size is 2 acres. So it could, in theory, be subdivided into a 3rd lot, but that's not the developer's intent. His intent is to get this approved and recorded and then sell it as a 2-lot subdivision.
All right, does that answer your question?
yeah, I guess to a certain extent. I just don't necessarily trust this developer. You know, initially they wanted to, in fact, before we had, the homeowners association had control of the development from a access standpoint. The developer passed an amendment to the declaration that they could use the water, sewer, runoff area within our property for future development. And so we couldn't, he still was owning more than a majority of the lots. So he made that, changed that as part of the declaration for our development to allow them to do that, which was in thought for his purposes at that time, because he was planning to develop the property above here. So if he's stating now that all he intends to do is just do a 2-lot subdivision with one home on the one lot and the existing home on the other lot, then that certainly lowers our concerns as far as what may be happening in our development.
I think that's what you're hearing tonight, and I think.
Yes,
you're-
correct. That's the intent. Yep.
And you're hearing from the planning director that the environmental constraints on this property would make it very difficult to do a larger subdivision.
Okay, okay. Second question, about the passageway or trail, to get over to the, bird sanctuary. Two concerns I have there. What are you gonna do as far as crossing over Mountain Road? I mean, that is a dangerous road, a lot of traffic on it, very curvy. And, how are people gonna cross that road safely if you're gonna put a trail and an access to get there from the trails that are in Stonehill Meadows?
Sir, I can answer this question as well, just because as you can hear from our previous discussions, this was a recommendation in the township, not necessarily the applicant. Clearly, we would need to work with, Mountain Road is a state road. So clearly, we would need to work with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation about appropriate actions to provide for access to the bird sanctuary. In asking for an easement, all we're asking for is allowing for the possibility, either through capital finance plans, capital project plans through the township, or through grant funding to be able to eventually build it. There's no plan to do it right now. It would be an undertaking to include construction of a trail along one portion of the site, but as well as crossing along that street. And anytime you're utilizing grant funds or doing anything next to or on a state road, there are regulations that do apply. So that would be to be discussed at a later point in time. It's just, this is our opportunity as the township to request this of the applicant during their subdivision process, so that the possibility exists in the future, so that you and your neighbors have the ability to get up to the bird sanctuary eventually, if we can get that project to become a reality.
Okay, I guess maybe it's a question that I can ask at a later date then, but how about parking? If you're saying that the access to this bird sanctuary is going to be through our trail system, where are people going to park for them to get to the?
There's already parking up there, sir.
What's that?
There's already parking up at the bird sanctuary. So
There is?
there's lots that are up there. So people who are going up there already have the ability to drive in and park there. I myself have been there a couple of times. What this trail would do would be giving you and your neighbors the opportunity to walk up there instead of having to drive there. That's all.
Okay, that's, again, my concern is if you're gonna have people going to the bird sanctuary, we don't want lots of people parking in the neighborhood, to get access to the trails to get to the bird sanctuary.
Okay, do you have any other comments or questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. You're good? Anyone else from the public with a comment or question? It seems like we do have an additional waiver item. I know there's been a draft motion that's circulated, but the draft motion, I do not believe deals with the waiver as identified on page 2, paragraph 2 on the township engineer's review letter. So I guess my question is, are you in a rush or can you wait for us to deal with the waiver that you're eventually going to request?
I believe the developer is in somewhat of a rush. Does that
Okay.
put the PC in a bad position?
Well, I guess it creates an awkward situation in that you're asking us to approve a waiver that you haven't even requested yet.
Yeah,
I mean, ideally, you want the PC to respond to a waiver
Yes,
request,
correct.
not.
yeah. Then I suppose we can wait for the recommendation until next month and I can provide,
Can you get it in before Monday?
yes, yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Get the waiver request in before Monday and we'll get you on the agenda for the May Planning Commission and we'll be able to deal with your subdivision application as well as your waiver.
Okay. Would you like revised plans as well with that request on the plans? They're going to be added in the future, but it's just the letter itself adequate.
I don't know that we need revised plans. Nate and Brian, I'll ask you guys if you want revised plans, but
No, I would think a waiver request would be.
Okay.
sufficient, But Nate, you want to?
I agree with that. I think all the points that we brought up, we could just make sure if they're on the record plan, then it won't be a problem.
And you heard Nate mention that we're looking for this easement for a
Correct.
future trail. Is there
Yes.
any problem with working with the township? If that were a condition of your approval, any issues with a condition, maybe something like the developer will work with the township in identifying an appropriate location for a future trail?
I'll have to defer to the applicant for that. I don't foresee that being an issue, but I'll have to.
Why
I'll have
don't
to
you
confirm with them
talk
first.
to the applicant and be prepared to answer that question at the next
Sure,
meeting?
yes. Will do.
All right, sounds like we're gonna table it, another.
Another-
Another Another plan being tabled tonight. So I'll entertain a motion to table the plan before us.
So move.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of tabling the plan, say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion passes by a vote of 5-0. We'll see you at the next month's meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Before we wrap things up, Nate, any planning directors report tonight?
No, nothing extensive other than the fact that, as previously mentioned, I would think in the next meeting or two, we're going to see the conditional use application for the big Top Golf development, which will obviously be taking up a lot of our time. So just be prepared for that.
All right, in terms of our upcoming meeting schedule, no workshop next week on April 18th. Is that correct, Nate?
That's correct. No
And our
workshop,
next-
April 18th. We'll see everybody again in May.
Yep, next regular meeting is May 9th, Tuesday, May 9th. Are there any other matters to come before the Planning Commission tonight? Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? We have a motion. Is there a second to adjourn? And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned at, looks like 7:26. And again, welcome, Mateen, Zias. I think you'll be a great addition to the planning commission.